I'm trying to stretch myself out, and God says, you cannot change yourself. You cannot do this. Stop fighting and let me. And as I hear that, these 3 surgeons step up to the edge of this table. All 3 surgeons identical, same height, same look, all wearing masks, all had the same voice, and they all speak at the same time. Stop fighting me. I know what I'm doing. And I look up at them, and this peace comes over me. And that same peace that I felt in that bedroom, I felt it again. And when he said that, I just quit fighting. And then God began to proceed to show me my sins, and he began to show me my condition. And as he's doing this, he shows me the Blue Cross Blue Shield symbol, the man that's in the circle, and he's got the shoulder-length hair, and it looks like his arms are going like this. But instead of seeing that, I see the symbol, and all of a sudden, as the symbol clarifies, it's no longer that man, but it's me. And I'm sitting here in this circle like this, chained to the circle. There are chains on my arms and on my feet, and I'm stretched out like that in this circle. And the man's in there, and as he's going by my mind, he's floating in space, helpless. And he can't get loose. He can't get free. And God says, this is your condition. You are trapped in sin and cannot free yourself. And then as the man goes by, then God shows me the world. And I see the world, and the world comes up to me. And as I'm looking at the world, it's getting larger, and all of a sudden it stops and it starts rotating. And as it's rotating, I hear a voice call out. And that voice says, I'm hungry. So in my mind I said, food. Then another voice, I'm cold. Fire, shelter, clothes. Then another voice, I'm lonely. And then another voice, then 2 voices, then 10 voices, then 20 voices. And it starts multiplying and multiplying. All these voices keep increasing in demands. Till all of a sudden I have the whole world screaming at me, wanting something from me. And all I can hear from them is this. What about me? What about me? Me. And it infuriates me. It gets to the point where it's penetrating, and I get so infuriated, I just scream out, enough! When I say that, the world just stops. It shudders and explodes. And God speaks to me and he says, you cannot be me. And I wake up, because up to this time, I've been my own God. And God says, you cannot be me. You cannot handle my responsibilities. After the world explodes, everything goes bright white, and then slowly the white goes away, and I begin to see this giant green hill. And it actually looks kind of like the green hill they had in that Windows XP Explorer, or the Windows that they had that big green hill. So imagine it being a lot taller, a lot bigger. And I look up, and at the top of that hill, I see this man, this figure, and he's standing there. And he's got kind of tight, long hair, real dark skinned, mustache and beard, and he calls down to me and he says, John, my son, come back to me. Come back to me, my son. Come back to me. Poof, just like that, I wake up. All that in my mind, but something was changed in me. When I woke up, something in me was changed. And what it was, now I realize, when I read back in the scriptures, God says, I will take away your heart of stone, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And that's what had happened. My anger and all that hatred and bitterness that I had towards humanity, God had removed it and had given me a heart of flesh, something that was new. Well, the first thing I say was, hey, I need to see my driver's license. I'm still tied up. They finally released me. And I said, can I see my driver's license? They bring my driver's license. I look at it, and when I'm looking at that picture, I could see the demons in my eyes. I could see the demons in my own eyes, and I knew. So at that moment, I knew there is something in me ruling inside me that isn't me, and I don't want it there. And I burst into tears, and I began to weep and cry. I said, I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't want to be like this anymore. I want to change. Well, long story short, what ends up happening is God fulfills my request. I asked God to take me off the streets and to take me off the drugs. That Saturday night, going on to Sunday morning, I end up in a rehab. I end up in a detox. I'm taken off the streets by force. I'm taken off the drugs by force. And they put me in a rehab. For a week, they had me in a suicide unit thinking that I was trying to kill myself when I wasn't. So while I'm in that suicide unit, I end up meeting a man who confronts me. He calls me out on all my stuff. He says, hey, quit lying to yourself. If you don't do what we're telling you to do, you're not going to change. And you're going to stay the way you are. And when you get out of here, you're going to go right back to the same garbage you came from. And this is the first time I'd ever had a father figure at all, of any kind, who would ever even be willing to speak to me. I hear this man's words and they hit my heart. So I choose to do what he does, and I do what they tell me. I leave that suicide unit. They put me in a detox center for a couple months, and I end up in another detox center after that. And finally, while I'm in that last rehab, while I'm there, some stuff that had happened when I was on the streets came back to me. When I was 15, I had met this girl, and she was from a small town in Chisago, Minnesota. And me and her had gone off, and me and her and a friend of mine and one of her girlfriends had gone to Chisago, and we went there to mess around, do some things we shouldn't do. While we were there, my friend's car ran out of gas, and we needed to get enough gas to get back to Minneapolis. So I told him, hey man, give me the keys. I'll go on to the gas station. I'll get us some gas. Well, I'm thinking in the back of my head, this girl's really starting to annoy me, so I'm gonna get away from her somehow. And I know how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take my buddy's car, go down and get gas, and I'm gonna take off. So I get down to the gas station. I fill the tank up, and I can't leave. Something in me would not let me leave that gas station. So I turn around, I go over to the attendant, and I say, hey man, just let you know, you might as well call the cops because I wasn't planning to pay for that gas. And I just stand there. The guy calls the police. The police come, they arrest me. They take the car under, they take it, whatever, they tow it away. I won't talk to the police. I'm not saying anything. They arrest me, they bring me down to the police station. They're trying to get me to talk, they can't get me to talk. Finally, I tell them my name. They find out who I am through my name, get my mother to come up, pick me up. My mom comes all the way to Chisago, picks me up, drives me all the way back to Minneapolis, pulls over on the street corner, and tells me to get out. So I open the door, I get out of the car, close it, and she drives on home and leaves me on the street corner. And it's probably we're talking maybe about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, okay? So I go back to doing what I'd always been doing. I went back to the streets, okay? Well, I never ended up going to the courthouse for that arrest, okay? So finally here, a couple years later, we're talking 2.5 years later, they still have a warrant for my arrest. They finally find me. I'm in this detox. I've been changing my life. I've gotten off drugs. And they pull me into court. And they said, we got a warrant for your arrest. If you don't show up for this warrant, we're going to carry on to your adulthood. And we will try as an adult. And then they begin to proceed. Why? Well, because we also have this against you now. Okay, the LSD they found on me, they claimed it was mine. I've been distributing whatever else. So I end up going, God, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. And I'm starting to think in my mind, I should run. I should run from this place. Well, the whole time I'm there, God had been talking to me. I'd begun to build a relationship with God. And God tells me, no, you stand here. You stay. You go there and you take accountability for everything you've done. So I go to court, and while I'm there in court, the judge and the prosecuting attorneys all stand up. They offer me a lawyer. I say, I don't need a lawyer. It gets to the point where I get frustrated with them and I kind of go off on them. Hey, I told you I don't want a lawyer. I know what I need to do. They finally settle with that. They bring me into the courtroom. They present their case against me. Then after they present their case, the judge asks me, how do you plead, Mr. McBain? And I stand up. And this is I sometimes break when I say this, okay, so if I do, forgive me. But I stand up, and I had no words for myself at the time, but God filled my mouth with wisdom. And I looked at the judge and I said, Your Honor, I'm guilty for all of those crimes that you claim that I've done and more. And I deserve to do a lot more time than what I've done. And I'm willing to take whatever time I have to take to pay the right, to make right what I've done wrong. Now the judge kind of looks at me and he's taken back. The prosecuting attorneys are taken back. They're like, whoa, hold up. This kid's not only confessing to these crimes, but he's saying he's done a lot more and he's willing to pay for whatever. So what ends up happening is this goes on, and the judge and the prosecuting attorneys, they begin to talk, and they change their mind. They said, do you have anybody here to speak on your behalf? Well, Tom, and he tells them, John has been an example to the people at the rehab. He's really changed his life. All this goes on. I'm not a Christian yet. I've begun looking for God. And the judge and the prosecuting attorneys, they all decide, we're going to give you a chance, Mr. McBain. What we're going to do for you is this. We're going to court order you to finish the rehab, and after rehab, you need to find yourself a home that will help you to learn to become a good citizen. It'll help you get a job, get back into school, or whatever you need to do, and help you to become a good citizen. You must pass both these things with flying colors, because if you do not, we will take you back here, we will bring you back here again, and we will try you as an adult. Okay? I'm like going, all right, sweet. I go back to the rehab. I end up going from the rehab to a place called Step. And while I'm at Step, you know, I meet this kid named David who ends up being a vice lord. He was a former vice lord, and he brings me to this church with him. Well, while I'm in that church, you know, is when the presence of God comes. I'm skipping something. What happens is, I get to the rehab. I'm still going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and stuff. And while I'm at the Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, I go to Minneapolis for one of the meetings. While I'm at the meeting, I'm sharing my testimony about how I'm changed my life. And while I'm there, there's this older black man there, probably in his late 40s, and he's looking at me with his arms crossed, kind of, you know, like, I don't think this kid's real. I think he's lying to me. And I remember afterwards, you know, everybody gives each other hugs in AA. So we went up, I give this guy a hug, and when I give him a hug, I throw the setup on his back. And he pushes me back and says, whoa, do that again. I said, do what again? Give me that hug you just gave me again. I want to see that hug. You give me that same exact hug again. And I'm thinking, what hug? I didn't realize that I had subconsciously thrown the set on his back. So I give that man a hug and I throw the set on his back, and he goes, man, I thought you was just a little wannabe. Now I know you're real. And I go, what do you mean? He's like, well, dude, you know, you did something and nobody else here would have known, but I know you're a true disciple now. He says, you know Little Money, G-Money, or you know Little Mike? I said, yeah, I know Little Mike. And we end up talking about that. He says, I can get you out of prison because when I was in the penitentiary, Little Mike, I saved his life, and he owes me a debt. And that's a life, because I saved his life. And he says, if you promise me to get out of this gang and not to come back, not to get involved in any of this anymore, and try to live your life straight, I'll ask him to give me your life in place of that debt. Awesome. That ends up happening. Okay. I never end up talking to that old man again, but he calls the rehab, talks to them, passes the word on to me, and I'm just in shock because I get retired. They retire my colors. So I'm out of the gang, I'm off the streets, I'm off the drugs, and I'll tell God, okay, who are you? Who are you, God? And I began looking for God. I started studying Islam, Buddhism, Shintoism. I started looking at all the religions I could think of. I started getting into the Native American stuff, cleansing myself with sage and all that. And what ends up happening is I go to this boys' home called Step, and I meet David, and David brings me to church. Well, he was a Christian. I'd never tried a Christian church. I'd never been in a Christian church. I wasn't raised in church, so I didn't know anything about it. Well, I walk into this church with him, and as these people are worshiping God, the presence of God comes down. When the presence of God falls down, I'm literally just, I get shook up. I mean, I'm scared. I'm like going, whoa, hold up, there's someone out here. And I fear thinking anything bad, looking at any woman in the wrong way. So I stand up, I run out the door, and I go back out to the front of the church, and I sit out there the rest of the service, smoke a pack of cigarettes, and I tell myself, I'm never going back in that church again. Well, David comes out, you missed the service. Yeah, I know, man. Couldn't go back in, da-da-da. He takes me home. Wednesday, David calls me up. Now, I'm determined I'm not going back to that church. He calls me up, and he says, hey, John, we got service again this Wednesday. Why don't you come with me? Okay. Well, why did I say that? David says, yo, all right, I'll be there to pick you up in a half hour. I hang up the phone and I'm going, why did I do that? Why did I do that? I don't want to go back there again. Well, David shows up, he picks me up, I go to church with him. And this time, when I walk into the church, I end up picking the seat farthest from the entrance. And I'm all the way in the corner with David. And they start worshiping God, the presence of God comes in, and it's like, all of a sudden, that warmth that I felt in the bed, the same warmth I felt when I was, you know, getting ministered by God, it all of a sudden came around me. Well, I'm in that corner, and it wasn't the same, I didn't have fear anymore. But it was like this love, this acceptance just came around me, and I felt this hand, like this giant hand. It was a lot bigger than mine, I mean, because the hand literally covered me up to here. And it touched me in the bosom right here, and I felt this fire begin to penetrate deep into me. And as that began to happen, I found myself weeping. I began to weep and bawl and cry. I wiped my eyes, and by the time I finished doing all this, I wiped my eyes and I look, and I'm in the front of the church. And the pastor's looking at me like, how can I help you, man? And it just came out of my mouth. I said, I need to give my life to Jesus. And from that point on, I became a Christian. Now, I'm sorry for going over, guys, a little bit. But what ends up happening is I end up coming to Bible college here in Texas on January 3rd, 94. I go to Christ for the Nations. God provides the money for that miraculously. He provides the airplane ticket. And after all that, you know, I'm going, God, what do you want me to do now? And God says, I want you to go to college. Well, where do you want me to go to college? I want you to go to DBU. No, everybody from CF&I goes to DBU. And so what ends up happening is I apply, and I tell God, I say, if you show up at the worship there in such a way that I end up crying, and I know your presence is there, I will apply to DBU and I'll attend school there. So I came to the service here. I went to one of the worship services. Everyone around me was just kind of sitting there, standing around. They weren't worshiping. They weren't singing. They had their hands folded. They were talking to each other. And I began to worship God, and God's presence fell so heavy that I began to cry. And I'm going, God, okay, stop. I don't, I'm hiding my face. Going, okay, I'll go to school here. And so I ended up applying. And that's 15 years ago. January 3rd, 94 was in McKinney, Texas. And, God's changed my life. I believe that God is able to change anyone. My whole life, if you look at it, was set up so that I would be a criminal, so that my life would destroy other lives. But God has changed that. And that's my testimony. Now I'm going to China to go do what God has put on my heart for 15 years.
Any questions? Any questions? Tell them you went back to find your old folks.
Yeah, when I actually did. After I got saved, I tried going back to Minneapolis and St. Paul looking for my gang member friends. And when I got back to Minneapolis, everyone that I had known was gone. Because what had happened was a gang war broke out between the Christians and the disciples. And when that happened, the police in Minneapolis, they came down on everybody. And they just came down on everybody. And so everybody that had been there either got arrested or they just took off and went back to another city. And so all my friends disappeared. People that had been my disciple friends. The only guy I could find was Odessa. And when I met Odessa was like, dude, you go on your way, man. You live the life you're living because it's better than this. And that was just the goodness of God, So.
Good appreciation. Thank you so much. How about you? Well, if you link to a missionary, right? He's going to China, be a missionary there. So how about you lead us a prayer and close the class?
Okay. Lord, I just praise you, Allah. You're faithful and you're good. And Daddy, there's no one else like you. There's no other God like our you. And I exalt your holy name. I ask, Father, that you would come into this room and see the hearts and the lives of everyone in this room. That you would cause them to walk in your way. Cause them to know you as you really are, the loving Father and caring God that you are. That there is no other God like you who gives mercy and who brings salvation to the hearts of men. Father, I ask you to touch them and help them to all come into that which you have for them. With their studies, Lord God, help them to stand strong in their hard times, to be faithful and draw near to you when they need you. Father, be faithful to them, I ask in Jesus' name.